And let's get things started. Okay, tonight the topic is on fatherhood. Okay, from the father I am to the father I want to be. I'm Carol. I'm very happy to be co-facilitating this conversation together with Alex. I have got two girls and happily married to my husband, Albert. Yeah, Alex, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, we have a slightly younger family. We have 3 kids. 10, 9, and 7, and we're a little homeschooling family. So I really think being a father is one of my greatest privileges in life. Yes.
And tonight we have the privilege of having 3 fathers and 1 grandfather with us. Starting from the left, we have Bruce. He has a daughter, and we're going to learn a lot about his journey tonight. Thank you for being here, Bruce. And we have Dr. Frankie and Tina Tan. Both of them are very actively supporting fellow families on different fronts, and we're going to hear from them, on especially Frankie. He supports fathers in different way. So thank you so much, Frankie and Tina, for being here tonight. And Parcsen serves as the head of programs in the Center for Fathering. He himself is a father of 3 and is also a grandfather. So we have a great mix, and we're going to have a great conversation tonight with these 3 fathers. So we are going to use Slido as usual as a way for us to share our questions. You can vote on one another's question or reply or comment. That's how we can continue to stay engaged as you listen to the sharing. And for us to get to know the now over 100 of us in the room. Okay, so if you see the QR code on the corner, you can use a separate device and scan the QR code. You'll be brought to a poll. Okay, and then we can see, are there more fathers in the room tonight, or are there more mothers, or are there others who are guardians or ministry workers who are concerned about families? If you don't have 2 devices, not to worry, just go to another tab of your browser, go to slido.com. The event code is Family Night. Okay, and as the program goes, I will also be including the link for you in the Zoom chat later, so that you can continue to put in your questions. So majority of us, okay, there are 36. Okay, there are 113 in the room, and there are now 40 participating, as you can see from the top right corner. So glad to see so many fathers here tonight. So good. And also mothers are here. Even though it's a topic on fathers, mothers also play an important role to support our husbands. So thank you for the mothers as well as the caring adults who are here. Thank you so much. So for those who have just joined us, what you are looking at on the screen is the poll. And I think some of you are trying to figure out how this works. You see the QR code on the top left corner, scan the QR code, and you will be brought to this poll. Okay, so about 60% of us, those who are participating, are fathers. Let's move on to the next poll question. Okay, and this is the final one before we go to the session proper. So let's see, for the fathers in this room, do we have younger fathers who are relatively new fathers on the journey of fatherhood, or are we more experienced fathers, or maybe wiser, gone through more things and have got different journey? Okay, so it's quite a good mix. Okay, some about 35%. 11 to 20 years. Okay, many of us of the fathers, only fathers need to respond to this poll. Okay, so the mothers and the caring adults can sit out of this so that the panel can get to know the profile of the fathers a little bit more. Okay, so 46 fathers have participated. Okay, so we see a lot of younger fathers on relatively new on the journey, 0 to 10 years as fathers. That's great. Okay, that's quite a good mix. All right, thank you so much for participating. And so this is the platform for you to ask questions. We're going to turn off the chat later because there are over 100 of us. So we want to be able to focus on the sharing by the panelists. So please use Slido to put in your question and your comments. And if you go to the Q&A tab, that's where you can leave your questions. Okay, now you are in the poll tab, go to the Q&A tab. That's where you can start to ask your question. You can comment on one another's questions and comment as well. Okay, all right, thank you. Alex, over to you.
Sure. We like to begin every family night with the Word of God. And today we have chosen the final verse of the Old Testament. And here it says, and he, referring to Elijah and John the Baptist in the New Testament, will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. And I really believe that this is a leading indicator, if you like, where we can know if a society is going uphill or downhill. Are the father's hearts turned to the children? And are the children's hearts turned to the father? Does the leader of this land have a father's heart that is turned towards his people? And what happens when we grow up without a father? You know, tonight I'm very grateful that Bruce, who has experienced fatherlessness firsthand, has come to share his story with us. So I'd like to begin with Bruce's story with a question to Bruce. Bruce, tell us about your growing up years. How did the absence of a father affect you?
Okay, my father left my mom and myself when I was 1 or before I was 1. I actually grew up in a big family. We stayed in a big house in Katong, and my mom had 10 siblings. Right, so as such, my house was always filled with people. But I guess because there wasn't a father around to protect me, to watch over me, I get bullied all the time. A couple of my mom's brothers were drunks. So when they came home after work or during a night of drinking, called their wives, I would always get it from them. I got beaten up very often, and I got blamed for things that I didn't do, got accused of stuff that I didn't know what it was all about. And growing up in that sort of environment has taught me that violence could settle everything. Okay. That being said, when I was a teenager, I was a very violent person. Very violent person. You can imagine there are 7 days to a week. The most I ever fought in 1 week was 9 times. And it wasn't just a one-on-one fight, it was a full-blown gang fight. Yeah. So in my mind, violence was the key to settle any problems that I have. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. Now that I'm older and I would like to say wiser, I knew how wrong my thinking was. But back then, this was the environment that I grew up in, right? So, yeah, that was my belief back then. I was a very angry child. I was a very angry teen. But I also believed that if my father was around, things would be very different. Things would be very different. Yeah.
Wow. And Bruce, so growing up in that way, how do you think it affected you, apart from this whole angle of violence?
Well, I guess.
What were some of your coping mechanisms?
Okay, so I guess both parents play a vital role in a child's upbringing.
Yeah.
All right. When any parent is out of the picture, is missing, that child will grow up missing in something. All right. And I guess a large part of me couldn't understand why. All right. That was so. Although I try my best not to think about it, I'm telling you right now, Alex, it did affect me big time. It did affect me big time. Did it stunt my growth? No, it didn't. But it sure made me a very undesirable person to be with. Just think about this. This was a comment made to me by someone who knew me back then when I was in my teens. Okay, we lost contact, and just like 2 years ago, we finally through social media we connected again. This was his statement to me. He said, Bruce, there are two people in the whole of Singapore my wife and I avoid like a plague. The first dude being this person whom I used to run around with. The next person is you. When we see you walking down the street, we either turn to the left or to the right. All right, you were such a unpredictable person. You could be smiling 1 minute, and then the next moment you'll be bashing someone up. Right? There were many instances where I was on a bus with my childhood sweetheart. All right, she said, we were halfway through the journey to Bedok interchange, and all of a sudden I'll tell her, let's get down the bus. Let's get down the bus. She asked me why. I said, I forgot. I need to whack someone down there. And she'll follow me down. I asked you, just wait at the bus stop for me. I went, I did what I had to do. I came, come, let's go. So can you imagine the sort of thinking I had, where fights, getting myself into fights, hurting someone was a norm? I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel that I was doing anything wrong. Right? Does that have anything to do with my father not being around? Of course it did. Of course it was. Right? My mom being a single parent, she had to go and work all the time. I'm an only child, no siblings. So every day I was left to my own devices. When I came back from school, all I did was I hid myself in my room, because I came back to a big empty house. And you know how scary a big empty house can be? Right? And if my mom wasn't around, even many times when she was around, I always get bullied. All right, I became the butt of jokes. I was bashed up. All right. And I remember when I was young, I always asked myself, why? Why did all this happen to me? And unlike other people, other children out there, when you see them going out, there's always a father and a mother, a father and a mother. But I was different. It made me feel that, unlike my peers, all right, I consider myself very abnormal, which I still do. Which I still do. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your very personal stories with us, Bruce. Appreciate. And if I could now invite Frankie to share your perspective, as we have heard how important father is to a child, and Frankie does a lot of work supporting fathers. And so Frankie, could you share with us a little bit more about what you do to support fathers on different fronts? And for a father here who want to start on the journey of being better fathers, where can they start? Frankie?
Yep. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, thanks, Bruce, for your sharing. Hello, everyone. Personally, I was convicted of my manhood and fatherhood journey from around 2006. At the time, I was already a father of two young toddler boys. And I read many books, attended several men's conferences to equip and spur myself on. This pursuit took place over a few years when we were living abroad. It was a big turning point in my life to be convicted about God's blueprint for men and fathers. And seeing how committed and supportive my wife was as a stay-at-home mom inspired me to want to initiate more and complement her in our parenting journey. We came home at the end of 2009, just in time for our eldest boy to start his P1 the following year. And thank God he gave us a very clear vision to live a community life in the heartland, to send our boys to the schools in the neighborhood and to plug ourselves in the local church so we would spend most of our time in this community. And one avenue that I engage and support fathers is through the boys' primary school, Greendale Primary School. I champion the Fathers at Greendale Support Group since 2010, whilst Tina chairs the school's parent support group. And Greendale Primary School was one of the first schools to launch the Dads for Life Fathers at Schools program. And thanks to Jason Wong, who founded Dads for Life, we could ride on this movement to create programs and events for fathers and their children to bond, and to inspire and equip them to be positive influences in their children's lives. In the earlier years, I would participate with my boys and facilitate the events and programs at the same time. It's been an inspiring experience throughout. I've learned and received so much even as I reach out and share. I feel so blessed to have met so many dads and their children in our community and to learn of their stories. Just like what Bruce shared, many dads that I met and with their children and hear of different stories. And some have become really good friends and we are still meeting up and cheering each other on today. Yeah, let me just share a few slides. So we made these standees a few years ago with the help of a fellow dad in the school who's into design and artwork. And these pictures you see here on display help to introduce new P1 dads to fathers at Greendale and the activities and programs that we organize throughout each year. On top of creating and facilitating fun activities for fathers to participate in and bond with their children, we communicate fathering tips for them to take home and apply. And these teaching points will be related to the nature of each activity. And just to give you some examples, here's an archery workshop that we've organized several times over the years. Archery is about target and aim. So we communicate 4 simple teaching points to dads during the activity. Number 1 is to choose your target. To ask the dad, what are you aiming at? And what do you want your child to aim at? Is your concern academic or material success? Or are you aiming towards good character, like responsibility, self-control, resilience, and so on? If we don't pick a target, our children may not have an idea where they are heading to. And secondly is to take aim. You may have a target, but if you don't aim at it, you will never hit the mark. And when you have a target, decide how you're going to start aiming at it in your own life and then direct your child in the same direction. It's important to make intentional effort to do so, because knowing is not enough. And thirdly is to improve your aim. Equip yourself like you do in the workplace for many men. Get expert advice, prioritize and practice. Give your child priority attention when you're off work. And be aware of your child's strengths and weaknesses and find ways to be encouraging and affirming. Improving your aim takes expert input and practice. Pay attention to how you father and what kind of father you look like through your child's eyes. And fourthly is to keep shooting. Once you have chosen your target and taken aim, keep shooting, just like a sharpshooter. A sharpshooter practices and keeps getting better. Fatherhood is a commitment to your child for life. So let's encourage one another to celebrate and persevere through the journey. Another novel activity that we've organized twice so far is go-kart racing. It's especially fun when it's night racing. And go-kart racing is about being fast. So during such an activity, I will remind fathers that life speeds by. Your role as a father will change over the seasons, but your opportunity to build relationship with your child is critical in this childhood phase or during the primary school years. If you don't practice, prioritize now, this stage passes very speedily and you can't rewind time. Just as you race together, it is exciting, it is fun, but it is also fast. Your turn will finally finish and soon the race is over. So seize the time and season of fatherhood now. It will be very soon, will pass and you can't rewind it to do it again. But the sacrifices you make today will build strong bonds with the child in the long run, and this relationship will last forever. And very quickly, the last example that I want to share here is our signature event each year, which is the P1 sleepover during the March school holidays. This is special because it's only for P1 kids and their dads. Yeah, and this is so special to every child because nothing beats having daddy come into their playground and they can play host. So we have night treasure hunt where the child has to work with daddy to find the answers to the clues that will take them across the entire school compound. It is a competition for every father-child pair to do so as quickly as possible. We get daddies to talk to their child about the school days and to read a book chosen by the child before going to bed. We facilitate several other activities the following day to affirm dads that you have got what it takes to be a great dad. We emphasize to dads that this is a critical transition phase when their child enters P1. dads should not relinquish their role and responsibility to their wives, but instead step in more to be involved in the child's day-to-day needs and educational needs. So this sleepover and other overnight camps that we run presents an extended time for intentional one-to-one bonding between father and child. Many lessons can be learned and shared, and long-lasting memories forged. We often use this opportunity to communicate and inspire fathers that their role cannot be replaced, and if they are absent or shrink in their role, the impact on the children and family will be lifelong. So I thought I'd quickly share this platform that I've been engaging dads for many years. This is just one of the few that God has called us to do so, to reach the community right where we live. And it's been very dear to us for many years because we meet with the dads and the families very often. We all live in the community. We meet them in schools, we meet them at the shops, we meet them at the MRT station. So it's been a blessing for us.
Thanks so much, Frankie. It looks so fun. And thank you for all the very intentional planning that goes into every activity that has a message for the fathers. Thank you so much, and for all your work over the years. And if I could ask Tina, as a mom, as a wife, watching how Frankie, fathers the 3 boys in your home, as well as a parent support group leader, planning all these different activities. What are some of your thoughts in terms of the role of fathers in their family, and how do we as wives support our husbands to make a difference? Tina?
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I think the very unique thing about us serving in the community, and especially in our children's school, is I get to come and nag the mothers on the behalf of the fathers. Mothers always complain that fathers don't do enough, right? They work too hard, they don't take over when we need them to, etc., right? But then when we organize things and we say, hey, come, we have father-child bonding, I have to actually go on stage every primary 1 orientation. I will go and have this little rah-rah with the moms and say, this is something you wanted. And now that it's happening, go and book your own spa, go and book your own personal private self-care time. Let the fathers come. Because the mothers initially, they would complain, say, how come the fathers get all the attention? Got all the free events, then mothers leh. So I will tell them, do you want to come and sleep on the hall of the school? Don't. Let your husband come. Let him go and supervise the eating, the brush teeth, the bathing, and plus the playing. And they actually learn so much about the child that you have been wanting them to learn, So I think we always take a tag team kind of approach. Whenever we have like that events, we really try to also affirm the mothers that you're doing such a good job, and it's not that we don't want to prioritize you now, but we want to spend more time trying to get the dads to be a bit more on board, actually doing your job for you, like nagging them, so to speak. Yeah, so I think that's something that needs some talking through, because a lot of times mothers may complain, but then when opportunities come, we tend to sabotage it without realizing it. Yeah, so I think that's something that really, even in the church, in a godly model of mother and father, we really have to step back sometimes, because women, we are so, God has blessed us with a lot of talents to manage the household, manage the children, and sometimes we don't tend to bring the husband in. Initially, when the child's a baby, we need him to carry, and then he change diaper, be a very active father. It's like, wow, very good already, But then come to primary school, suddenly all those kind of practical help is not really there. Mothers tend to be the ones supervising the letters that come from school, homework, right? Homework submission, communication with teachers, etc. That the fathers tend to go, don't need me that much. I'm here, need me, call me. But they sort of fade away. And mothers don't realize and maybe don't have ideas about how to get the fathers on board. Yeah, so oftentimes we give people examples. We say, allow your husband to take the lead sometimes, right? Let them be spontaneous if they're spontaneous. If they are rigid, they need to plan something 1 month in advance, let them be rigid, allow them to succeed. I think mothers need to look at that and allow your husband to succeed, because when they succeed, we also succeed. We actually enjoy the family more. They are engaged, they are there caring and loving the children. And that's exactly what we want, Yeah, so this is something which begets a little bit of nagging, as I say, and it needs to come from a mother lah. So the men cannot nag the wives, right, or nag other women. So that's what we do sometimes in this tech team. I'm so glad to see that we have majority fathers in the room. So speaking to you all as well, give your wife a chance to slowly see you rise up. You know, don't suddenly come in and go, okay, I know after today I learned about fathering, I must be very involved. You know, you want to take over everything. You're going to shock her, huh? She's good at certain things, let her flourish in the area. Bring in your strengths as well, you know, and be gentle with her as she gets used to your involvement again. Yeah. So this is something which I think it's really grows us as husband and wife, you know, parenting, being transformed to go through difficulties with our children, you know, to check with one another, not feel alone in the journey, because you chose the person to marry, right? Whether it's talking to fathers or the mothers, nobody forced you into it. But now that you have different roles over the years, sometimes we forget and we lose that partnership, and we end up being one against the other. You know, why you're not doing that? You know, I'm doing so much. And then the husband will say the same thing, right? Why are you not doing whatever? You know, I am bringing in more, you know, I need to work, right? Bring in the dough, etc. So I think going back to the basics, you know, being a team that loves one another, that has different strengths that you can really leverage on, is something that will really allow the family to be a model and in that design that God intended. Yeah.
That's great. That's great, Tina. Thank you. You know, I was wondering, like, from your perspective as a mother, why do we need fathers? Why are mothers the best mothers? Why are they not enough?
I think that's such a good question, right? Because we are a Christian meeting tonight, I can say it's really God's biblical design. You know, it's not a singular authority in the home, but both the father and mother bring different types of wisdom, different types of strengths. Their personalities in complementary as well, bring that sense of security in the home. Yeah, so for example, simple things like, you know, the mothers would be nurturers, right? They care for safety, protection, health, nutrition, you know, and then they tend to go into aspects that surround these areas. Whereas the father would look at a lot of other things. They actually look at resilience, right? Sportsmanship, going outdoors, yeah, play. They don't even mind allowing some risks. You know, they are the ones that throw the baby up, right? Like when you don't really see a mother doing that. When the father will be the one to throw the baby up and down because he knows he has the strength to catch the baby. A mother will be thinking, oh, how to do that? Later injure the spine. Oh, you cannot. You know, obviously, also most mothers are not so strong and fit. So just a little imagery, right, of the difference between how a father approaches parenthood and a mother. So both in complementary really bring about that beauty of design, you know, to give safety, nurturing, yeah, and teaching, you know, godly principles to the children.
I love that perspective, and I want to thank you, Tina, for reminding fathers in our midst that they play a very unique role, right? This whole area of risk, I mean, like, it's one word to us, but in fact, it's a huge deal, right? Like, we don't want to risk, we don't want to raise risk-averse, kiasu children the whole way. And mothers, by their very nature, are more nurturing and more doting than they are challenging and pushing and encouraging, right? Literally putting courage into our children. So thank you for reminding our fathers. Parcsen, I want to come to you. I want to speak a little bit about wounds. You know, we spoke before this call, and you revealed also that your growing up years, even though your biological father was with you, you know, there was a sense of fatherlessness as well. And you were nursing that wound, which is so common among fathers, that prevents us from being all that we can be, right? So I was wondering whether you can talk us through how you went through some healing, and if fathers amongst us are also nursing that wound, what would you suggest they do?
Well, thanks, Alex, for that question. Just to give a little bit of context, what happened was that when I was 10 years old, my parents went through a divorce. Although they didn't go through the whole way, so they're still legally married till today. But they have been living separate lives, and my sister and I, my elder sister and I, we were kind of caught in between. And I just want to also make it clear that, you know, my parents' breakup in their marriage affected both of us, my sister and I, quite differently. And I guess it affected me more. So what happened was, I guess the best way to put it is that my relationship with my father kind of became suspended in animation. It just froze in time. And so I was 10 years old, and that was where it kind of stopped. It wasn't until much later in my life that I began to understand a bit more, and I began to reach out to my dad and reconcile with him. So that would be another story I can tell later on.
That's great. Yeah. Can you actually, walk us through, if we have fathers in our midst who are estranged from their earthly fathers, who were never affirmed, who never saw good fatherhood being modeled for them, and now they want to be better fathers, they want to make amends, what would you suggest they do?
Come and attend the workshop I conduct. Or they can buy the book that I've written. It's called The Modern Day Dad.
Right.
So I wrote this 2 years ago, and not because I'm an expert dad, because I'm an excellent dad. I think I became better with the third child, but with the first two, I was struggling with my sort of fatherlessness. And so when I joined Center for Fathering, during the interview, I honestly said I'm applying to join Center for Fathering not because I feel I know a lot about fathering, but I came to join it hoping to learn something. And I think I did learn through my many interactions with fathers, of all kinds. And that's where I began to put down the stories and the things I've learned. And a lot of, I went through a lot of books and, research papers and things like that, just to understand a bit more about what is the latest studies about fatherhood and things like that. Yeah. So, so that was the process I went through, and so I think fatherlessness is something that happens. There are two main categories of fatherlessness. One is, of course, when the father is not at home, totally absent. So it's either due to incarceration, or maybe the father is deceased, or maybe the father has abandoned the family. But for every one of these cases, there are, I think, many more cases of the other kind of fatherlessness where the father is present physically, but absent emotionally. It means the father is the strong, silent type, the disciplinarian, but not a very nurturing, not a very loving, and not a very talkative, communicative kind of father. And so even though the father is there physically, but emotionally he's disconnected with it from the child, and disengaged, right? And so it's as good as not having a father. And that was my experience. That's my experience of fatherlessness. I lived with my father throughout my childhood, and until I got married and moved out. But in spite of that, it was as good as not having a father at all.
Got it. Yeah, we'll come back to you a bit later, Parcsen, on even recognizing and seeking this reconciliation, right, with fathers. Bruce, I want to come back to you. We've got a question here, actually, about this delicate balance, right? About being authoritative, exercising some firmness, some strictness, but without becoming authoritarian, right? Especially towards preteens and teenagers. You have a daughter, and she's, I believe, 13, 14 years old. So that's quite an interesting time as well, right? How have you tried to balance authority without being authoritarian?
Okay, thank you for that question. My daughter is 12. She'll be 13 next month. So the last time I was in prison, she was like 3 years and 1 month old. So by the time I came out, she was close to 7. So safe to say, for more than half of her life, I wasn't around. So when I came out, I noticed some traits in her that I didn't like. One of it was she loved to argue with my wife. And I was brought up to believe that traditional Chinese family, where you respect your elders, right? You do not argue with your elders, especially your parents, especially in public. Okay, so When I came out, I noticed that she did a lot of that. So for more than a year, I spoke to her about it. I debated with her. I scolded her. I even threatened her. Okay, and apparently none of it worked. But each time I did so, I always tell her this. I said, darling, don't make me angry. All right. If you make me angry, you will get it from me. Okay, you will get it from me. So one day when I was coming back from my in-laws' place, I'm staying in Tampines, my in-laws stays in Boon Lay, in Jurong West. So as we were coming back, right off the bat when we entered the MRT, I don't know what my wife was asking her. She started arguing with her, my wife. She raised her voice. I tripped. All right. All I did was that turn. I looked at her and I said, I told you many times already, right? Okay, go home. You're going to get it from me. And for 1 hour during the train ride, I didn't say anything. When I got home, I said, go inside your room. I came into my room where I kept the secret weapon, of course, the cane. Yeah. But before I went over, because you're still a kid, a child, I didn't want to exert too much strength that it would really scare her mentally or even physically. I'm quite big, I'm quite big, all right? Neither do I want it to be too soft where, she's not afraid. So what I actually did was I tested on my own legs. I was like caning myself, testing on a bed. And once I found the right strength, I went into the room. I said, okay, I'm going to cane you. And you know why? You know why I'm going to cane you? Because you did this, and I told you not to do it, right? This is wrong. Bend down. The first stroke went down. It was quite hard, mind you, it was quite hard. I raised my arm and I went down. You know what happened? She didn't budge. She did not budge. And I tell you, my heart sank because I knew I had to break her. I knew I had to break her and I cannot let this pass. And I said, oh God, please, 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 please. All right, please. The second stroke, when I went down, she started crying. So that was when I stopped. I hugged her. All right. I said, darling, I love you, right? But you know you did wrong. So please don't ever do it again. If you do it again, the next time I'm going to cane you double and even harder. I know some parents out there right now, they must be, oh my gosh, Bruce, how can you exert caning and all that? Well, you know what? I believe in what the Bible says, right? Not only spare the rod and spoil the child, but also teach a child in a way that he should go, so that when he grows up, he will not depart from it. And that is what I have been doing since I came back. Right? As harsh as it might seem, you know what? The 2 strokes sure work wonders. So much so that until today, all I need to do is give that death stare. She knows better to not do what I say. Right? So that is the balance that I strike. Right? I try not to be as authoritative as possible, but the thing is this: I know I've been around the blocks many times. Right? A bit of context for the participants. I've been in prison 5 times. I've been involved with drugs and gangs since I was 13. I'm 53 this year. I came out 6 years ago. Right, so most of my life was spent in drugs, in gangs, or in prison. Okay, I was brought up in a single parent family, and since my teens, I always wanted to have a family of my own. And my biggest fear, when I told myself, when I have a family of my own, I must not be like my father, an absentee father. I must be around to nurture, to protect my daughter, my child. But of course, my biggest fear came true. When she was 3 years and 1 month old, I went into prison. So back to our story. Yeah. I guess fathers have an instinct also. Sometimes it is very difficult to say exactly, this is what we're going to do. These are the rules and the regulations of the home. These are the, whatever you're going to call it. Sometimes when the time comes, you just know what to do. And I believe I've learned to trust my instincts in things. All right. Many people have said that I'm very harsh with my daughter. I'm very strict. But I'm also very doting. All right. She is my only child, and I absolutely adore her. Adore her. Yeah.
Well, you send her to school every morning,
every
and
morning.
you guys are on the bus every morning,
Yeah.
right? So that's a good perspective, Bruce. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very delicate topic, right? And I was wondering whether I can also take it to Frankie and Tina. This whole area of being firm, but not being a military sergeant, right? Like balancing authority without being authoritarian. And I was wondering whether you guys can share your perspective.
I think for us, we would often check in with one another to see how we are doing through the eyes of our, in the eyes of our children. Sometimes I don't feel that I'm that harsh, but according to Tina, I don't have to be physical. No? Once I raise my voice, it's really, really loud, and it can be quite daunting. So that's an aspect that I need to be aware of. So there are times where I raise my voice, and later on I had to actually come to my voice and seek their forgiveness, for at times where I unnecessarily raise my voice or may appear to be harsh. Yeah, so in a way it's good. I really thank God that in our parenting journey, we have one another to check in and help each one of us calibrate. And all our three boys are very different. The eldest is very much a verbal person, so he needs someone like Tina to verbalize a lot of things with him. I'm less of a verbal person. I tend to be more action person or a heart person. But sometimes if I don't verbalize myself, I don't engage in some sort of a verbal sparring, it may not meet the needs of my elders. But then my second and third one, they are different. My second boy actually has special needs, so he communicates very differently. And our third son is actually a very sensitive boy. He's currently still struggling with anxiety. So when we parent them in the home, we need to be aware of our approach. Certain things we can't say to all the three together. Sometimes we have to take them apart so that they would learn and understand how we sort of engage each one of them differently. Even though the message may be the same, but our approach would be different. Yeah, so it's quite complex when you have a few children, right? But at the same time, it really keeps us going. It keeps us humble to continually learn and appreciate the task of being a parent. It's never easy, right? If you have one and if that child is a perfect child, then you will be so proud of our own parenthood. Yeah, at the same time, when we have two or three, you can see they grow up differently. But at the same time, now that they're older, there are a lot of things that we can learn from them. Now we give them the green light to even expose or reveal to us the things that we have not done so right in the past. And sometimes we even seek forgiveness and sort of repent. And then we reconcile, and then we move forward stronger. Yeah, so we thank God for all these opportunities. Yeah.
Right. Tina, do you have anything to add? Frankie, I love your point about children just being different, and as parents to be conversing, dialoguing with one another, and really knowing your children, because what applies with one might not apply with the other, right? And that takes intimate knowledge. That takes intimate knowledge that only parents have, right? And Tina, I wonder whether you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I think it's never one answer, right? I think you really have to know each child. I agree with Bruce. Biblically, God does not restrain us from using whatever it takes almost, yeah. Of course, not bordering abuse. But so I did cane my boys when they were young. The first one, responded. I mean, he would learn really quickly. of course I'll explain, tell him, cane him very, very without anger, But the number two, because he has ADHD, he is, fleeting all over the place, right? He's not able to really be in the moment, especially when he's young. So I realized that, and then he would transgress a lot more, like do crazy things, not follow instructions. So he would. But the moment I caned him, he'd be so scared. But the second after, you look at his eyes, and I said, do you know why I caned you? He can't remember already. But he was just so scared of my caning, to the point that sometimes when I'm beside him and I just move, he would flinch, And I didn't really cane him that much, but I guess he just, really associated that the fierceness and all that to just a scary hit and a physical force, but he didn't learn a single thing. Like, he didn't know why I was hitting him. So I realized quite soon, even before I got his diagnosis, that this really doesn't work with him. Even reasoning out doesn't work with him. Really had to learn new strategies. So I went for different kind of parenting courses, go and learn different techniques, because we were really, and it actually brought us to our knees, the difficulties between parenting our first two, and all this, thinking I'm a social worker by training, I'm a tend to be a quiet girl growing up, like prefect, that kind of thing. So I always thought that, you just be firm, you tell the give the direction, your children will follow. I think it was very humbling to have children that really like showed us that it's not that straightforward, and brought us to our knees. Those early years, we really pray every night, just cry out to the Lord and ask him, like how, our children were like really quite havoc, literally like bite someone at the playground, or scratch and hit each other until got blood, all that kind of drama, just to make you say I'm not, make you know I'm not over exaggerating, okay? But that brought us to our knees, and to really hear from God, and then trial and error. And like Frankie said, I think oftentimes going back even to the children and saying, we didn't do right, and reconciling with them. And even if it was many years ago, coming back and revisiting that. Because we had a third one after the first two. In Australia, the last one was born. So there's a big gap between the first two and the last one. So, and the last one is that sensitive one, right? So parenting him helped us to realize that, hey, actually, if we had been just a bit more gentle, maybe with the number one even, he may have been so much more responsive than us using that force or that fierceness that we thought in the beginning. So it's a real learning journey.
Thank you so much for the different perspective in raising, the older children. If now I could turn the time to address the questions for the newer fathers. So there's a question here by, I think it's a new father. How do I support my wife and baby when I only have 2 weeks of paternity leave? If I could address this question to Parcsen, I think Parcsen in the Center for Fathering, you do encourage fathers to take their paternity leave. So what would your advice be for this father?
Yep. First of all, just take the 2 weeks of paternity leave as much as you can. Try not to save any for later, because we've talked to many expecting and new fathers, and they all have in mind, okay, I instead of using my annual leave for visits to the pediatrician, I want to use my paternity leave. So I really encourage them, don't do that. I think the 2 weeks of paternity leave, if you can use as much of it as you can, will really give you a head start, a kind of a jump start, to your fathering journey. All the little things that you do, during the initial periods, all right, bathing, changing, all right, and just looking into your baby's face and making all kinds of funny noises. Those are very endearing, and they will really help you to bond with your new infant, your newborn, like no other ways can. Okay, so and at the same time, you will be kind of be around to support your wife, both practically as well as morally. Okay, and in the weeks ahead after your paternity leave is over, well, do what you can. Come home early as early as you can from work, and be there to do as much as you can. All right, and because I think more important, also very importantly, is to be very aware of your wife's emotional state. Okay, because I'm sure you have heard of postpartum depression. Okay, now one thing that many people do not know is that postpartum depression is experienced both by moms and dads. The problem is that dads are underreported because most of the time they'll say, you know, oh, I'm just having a bad day. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and so on and so forth. And so they will call it anything except depression. All right. So it's just simply underreported, but dads can also experience postpartum depression. So what I encourage parents, new parents to do is really to have, you know, that set aside time to get to do a stock check of each other, all right, to really be honest with each other, all right, and be very open and say, you know, how can I better support you? Just ask each other questions like this, all right? How can I better support you? Because, you know, in marriage, okay, we all know that expectations are dangerous things. So I always ask couples, what do you think is the worst kind of expectations? All right. And most of them would say, well, unrealistic expectations. I say, yes, unrealistic expectations are really unrealistic. But there's something worse than unrealistic expectations, and those are unspoken expectations. All right. When you have expectations of your spouse, but you do not make it known, then it's unfair. If your spouse doesn't fulfill your expectations, you have no right actually to be angry, okay, because you didn't make it known. Okay, so find the time, all right, to have this state of the union, what John Gottman calls the state of the union conversation, which can take anything from 5 to 15 minutes a week, all right, and just simply ask the question, you know, how more can I support you? What do you want me to do more of? What do you want me to do less of? Okay, for example, you know, stop changing the diapers. You are just no good at it. All right, fine. Then let me do something else. So those are the very simple, practical ways you can, you know, just be there to support each other. I like to use the analogy of beach volleyball. Okay, where there are two players and they are, you know, both players are playing the game full time. Okay. And both of them have one eye on the ball and the other eye on their partner, on their teammate. Okay. And when they see that their teammate is unavailable, whether maybe my teammate is on the ground, right, and trying to recover, then I tell myself I have to step up, I have to stand, I have to really be alert to receive the ball that is coming across from the other side. Okay. And so that's what couples have to do for each other. We have to have one eye on the baby and one eye on the other, on your spouse. And if your spouse is unavailable, and just out of action for a while, then you just got to step in. And so I think that's how we support each other, both ways. All right, it's not just husband supporting wife, because we always think that the wives are doing the hard pushing because of the labor and all that. Husbands also do struggle and need support as well. So we have to just support each other.
Love it. Thanks, Parcsen. And one theme that has recurred is this whole idea of humility, right? Like getting on our knees and actually asking God when we don't have all the answers. We heard that from Frankie and from Tina, and even your question, right? How can I better support you? Requires humility as well, right? And I am reminded of this quote: nothing of heaven can live in us if pride is in us. So I just thank you for that reminder. So people, how can I better support you? Right? We can ask that of our spouses. We can ask that of people that we work with even. Actually, next question that that broke my heart almost when I read it. It's around this whole topic of reconciliation. And it says here, I left home because of a gambling addiction and I've changed and would like to reconcile with my son, but he's not receptive. How should I deal with it? Bruce, I was wondering whether you've got any perspectives here.
There's no one solution for a problem like this. Everyone's journey in life is very different.
Yeah.
There was one stage, I also, besides my drug problem, I also had a gambling problem, right? And to me, gambling addiction is even much worse than drug addiction. it got me, it got my family into a lot of unnecessary problems. I had loan sharks coming up to my home to spray paint and everything. For the person with that problem, I guess my only advice would be, be there. Let your son know that you love him, and that you'll always be there to support. Right? It's pointless to push the issue. Hey, come back to me, come back to me. I think it's absolutely pointless. He will come back when he is ready. Don't force the issue. It will not help at all. Right? Just like drug addiction, I believe that the Americans have this saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Your son, for whatever reason, maybe he feels embarrassed right now. Maybe he feels that his problems are solved. Maybe he feels that at this present moment everything is fine and dandy, but he just doesn't want to get back to visit the mother. I don't know. I don't know what his issue is or are. Right? All I can say is just be prepared for the day. Just show love. Let your son know that you still love him, and just be prepared for the day when he will come back. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you so much for the encouragement. If I could take the next question to Frankie and Tina, and it's about how the relationship between the wife and the husband in parenting. What to do when my wife constantly undermines and criticizes me in front of my children? What would be your advice? And perhaps layering another perspective to that question would be, what are your thoughts in terms of spiritual leadership in the family, right? And the role of submission or respect and honor, and how does that come into this in terms of the mother being more enthusiastic, perhaps, to put it this way, and sometimes we might talk down to our husband without even knowing it. So perhaps Tina and Frankie could speak into that.
Yeah, I think I know the wife of whoever asked that question is likely not listening in, but there may be other wives here. And sometimes there is that gender bias as well. When men are rough and aggressive, right, or their tone of voice, and then they even like hate the children or whatever, women get upset, right? Like, oh, how can you be like so fierce or children or that? But we don't realize that women have a weapon, right, that we use, and it's very subtle. No one will even go and say report police about this kind of abuse, but it is very lethal, and that is the tongue. Okay, we use words to attack our husbands, and that is, I think, really under the belt. Okay, but answering the husband who is genuinely asking, I think it's not easy. I mean, if your wife is not listening here, of course, if she's listening, she'll be angry with me for saying all this as well. So she has to be ready to listen, because for sure, come from a position where if she's undermining you and maybe even pointing out your weaknesses, be humble to listen to the truth in it. Okay, maybe really she's saying like, wow, you don't say anything when I asked you yesterday, then now you come and give direction and change my plans, for example. Then think about it. It's true. She asked you yesterday and you didn't say anything, but now you want to dominate. Okay. So there's always truth to what the woman is saying, even if she butts in and says it in a mean way. But take it away from the children, have that couple time to talk heart to heart, and start from a position of humility, saying, okay, I disappointed you. I did something that you're upset about. That's why you attacked me in front of the children. And I think when you take a step of willingness to learn, even from a harsh kind of approach that your wife has taken, I believe most white women will tone down. Okay, most of them, or okay, even if they blast you then, okay, it's a chance for you all to settle things openly, for you to say, okay, what can I do better, right? And then also have your part, your say on not giving excuses, but getting her to understand where you're coming from. Yeah, and then both ways for her to say, then what do you expect me to say next time? And then you can give each other cues about how you can settle things, but not in front of the children. Yeah. So I think having conversation, communication is very important. Don't let it be, and don't let it, if you're really hurt by it, which I really understand, don't let it keep eating you without dealing with it. Because then it's going to happen more and more in front of your children, and you will one day blow. And then you will look like the bad guy. You know, you will do exactly as what she's saying that you're doing, that you're lousy or whatever, you know. So don't let it fester. Just bring it to her and say, even, you know, call her out of the house if the home is not a good place, you know, arrange someone to look after the children or whatever it may be. Say, hey, we really need to talk, and I want to talk heart to heart. Yeah, it may not take just one session, because she may really need to see that you're sincere. You're not just trying to solve the problem and save your pride. Yeah, like Alex reminded us, if pride is there, then no chance really lah. Yeah, and women are very sensitive to authenticity. So if you just want to save your face in front of the children, she's probably going to continue to rub your face in the mud. Yeah, but if you're willing to listen and say, hey, why are you so upset with me? And, you know, I really have no idea why I'm not meeting your expectations. Then have that heart-to-heart talk over a period of time. You know, it may be plowing in bit by bit and say, okay, we'll talk again. You know, if it gets too hot and heated, say, postpone it again and say, let's come back again. You know, I need to think through. I'll let you calm down. I also need to calm down. Yeah, and I think doing this builds your marriage, and then that will be a very big blessing to your children. Yeah. But thanks for being so brave to ask this question. Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think typically we know that the wife is meant to be an able helpmate to the husband. Yeah, but because of the fall of man, we see that wives can become the usurper. So that's when many men may relinquish their role and their responsibility. So it's something that we need to be aware of as well. So because of the fall of man, many men may end up being very passive in the areas that where they are meant to be active. Yeah, men can be active at work, but can be more passive in the home front, in the social front, in the family front. So that leaves room for some wives to step in to say that they need to do more. And when they do more, they feel frustrated. And that's when conflicts start to arise more. So I think both husband and wife need to understand the nature of man and the fall of sin. And therefore we can come to God to understand his design for us. So in our authentic manhood journey, we always have this tagline or vision to remind men, first of all, we need to reject passivity, accept our responsibility, then to lead courageously, and importantly, to invest eternally. So the first step is to reject the passivity in areas that we need to be active, and to be actively involved in areas that are important for our children or the family. And then we can be in that position to really initiate and lead. And that helps our wife to come to a position of submission, to know that we are showing love, we are showing leadership. So it's really that tag team, that complementary role. So it's not just about capability, it's really about recognizing the position and the role. So hopefully women or wives would see that more clearly, then they would not sort of overtake certain things that they actually prefer the husband or the father to do, but because she feels that she's more capable, end up she continue to do more. And then men, you know, knowing that since you want to do it, I'll just let you do it and continue to do it, and then I can go and do other things. So that instead of coming closer together, you end up drifting apart.
That's great. Thanks, Frankie. Yeah, I'm just reminded that even represented on Slido are numerous impossible situations, right? Situations where sometimes the methods, even the best methods of men might fall short. But I'm really reminded of what you guys had brought up earlier also about just going to the Lord in prayer, just getting on your knees and just crying out to the Lord. And that is something that I know I can never do enough, you know, and something that I know if I personally were to fail, I will fail everywhere. If I fail in prayer, I will fail everywhere. And so I just want to encourage all of us here who are facing impossible situations, right? With our children, with our spouses, in our families, take it to the Lord in prayer. And don't give up until until the Lord turns his face towards our situation, right? If I could now go to the top voted questions, what are some tips we can adopt as fathers to learn to aspire to be the man of the household, right? I'm wondering what a man of the household really means, whether it's in the man of the house. I was wondering whether you guys have got any ideas how father man of the household to be the man of the house. What can they do? Anyone? Parcsen?
Okay, I'll try this. I know this has been a very thing going around for a long time. You know, that the man is the head of the house. But I think in today's context, I think couples would prefer a shared parenting kind of thing, you know, shared responsibility and shared authority. So that's why I use the metaphor of a beach volleyball team where there are only two players and they form a team, you know, and they are trained together, they practice together, they support one another, okay, and they bring their own unique abilities and strengths to the team to enhance, you know, the performance of the team. And another very important aspect of the beach volleyball team is that, you know, unlike the 6-player volleyball team, there are no substitutions. These two players play throughout the game from start to finish. And I think that was a very pertinent point about parenting, right? That mothers and fathers, the biological mothers and fathers, needs to be mothers and fathers for life, okay? So I think while I totally understand this thing about men of the house because, you know, there needs to be a leader, right? Okay. But I think there is a very thin line and it's easy to cross where we go into, again, you know, becoming a dictator and becoming very controlling and things like that. So while I believe that, you know, yes, a man can be, in a sense, have the final say, but it's also very important for him to be very open to the opinions, points of view of his partner, like the wife. And I think there's a very important place where he shares the power. So he may be, you know, he has the deciding vote. But if he's open to listen and even to be able to be willing to share the power with his wife, who is his partner for life, all right, in this parenting team as well, then I believe everything will work out very well. Okay, so I think that's the key there, willingness to share power. Because if you're not willing to share, then, you know, human beings being human beings, all right, there will be a power struggle. So we don't want a power struggle, right? So share it, then you will avoid a power struggle at home.
That's great. Bruce, anything there?
I totally agree with Parksen. You know, I guess I'm bordering on being a chauvinist. You know, I'm unapologetic about it. But I agree totally with Parksen. Even in my home, although I have the last say, I do discuss things with my wife. I like to believe that I'm very open-minded about things. You know, I will tell her my views, she tell me her views. And, you know, sometimes if I can't make a decision on the spot, I'll sleep on it and I'll say, I'll let you know tomorrow. Yeah, I guess decisions made in this way would always be best because nothing is one-sided. You know, male and female, dads and moms, we each have our own perspective in things or about things. Yeah, so a shared kind of parenting, sit down discussing decisions that has to be made, I guess is best. But I repeat, I have the final say.
Thank you.
If I may add to this thing about the final say, you know, this is how I do it with my wife in more recent years. I wish we did it right from the beginning. You know, I think in the past, the man had the final say and the only say because, you know, the men were out there working. And so probably because of experience and general knowledge, he would probably be, you know, make better decision, you know, than the wife who tends to be typically a homemaker, right? So, but now because of, you know, more and more women are out there working as well. So I think they have the experience, they have the general knowledge, you know, they know more things and have much more to contribute in terms of ideas and opinions. So in my household, in my family, I have the final say, but I would listen to my wife. And sometimes I would say, okay, my decision is that we will do it my way. And I think maybe half the time, or sometimes more than half the time, I would say my decision is we will do it your way. All right. But the important thing after this is that if I say we'll do it your way, meaning my wife's way, and things don't turn out right, then I must remember never to say, you see, I told you so.
One thing about my household also I want to add is that my daughter also, she gets a say in things. For example, if she wants to do something, you know, normally she needs to ask permission. She asks my wife, and then my wife would say, hang on, or she asks me and I say, hang on, let me discuss with Mama first, I'll get back to you. And if the answer is no, and then the ball is in her court, you know, it's up to her to try and persuade me to sway the other way. She's allowed to do it. And more often than not, when I say no, I would always tell her the reason why. Yeah. And if I say no, she wants to sway me to want me to allow her to do certain things, then she has to persuade me.
That's great.
I'd like to share something about this question. I think as men and fathers here, it may not be as easy for you to say this. You know, let's go back to God's word, right? What does it say? How do you be a man of your household? Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Yeah, and then again in verse 28, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. And I think leadership starts with love. Because if God knew that he just wanted men to lead in the home, make the decisions, be the authority, he would say, husbands, lead your wives. Because the verse before was, wives, submit to your husbands. But he didn't say, husbands, lead your wives. He said, husbands, love your wives. And when you love your wife as your own body, you know, think about what you do nowadays for self-care. You know, you think about, wow, the kind of good food you want to eat, you know, the kind of thing you want to buy yourself, because we're all stuck at home, cannot travel. So people have been buying themselves big cars, nice watches, right? Things like that. Do you thoughtfully and tenderly love your wife in that same way? Thinking about what she likes, not just on Mother's Day or on her birthday, making things easier for her, really loving her as if it's your own body. Like, you know, she gets less sleep, but you say, I also get little sleep, you know, but can you lay down your life for her? You get less sleep than her sometimes to show your love for her, for example. You know, I'm talking about like your children are young or you have issues, you have to stay up with your children, you know. And that is the starting of leadership, because when a woman feels loved, when a woman feels that you're laying down your life for her, she will follow you. She will allow you to have the last say. She will seek your advice even, because she knows that you are looking into not just your own well-being, but the well-being of her and the household. And that is something that will make your wife love you so much more, because women are very giving, okay? And that's why God doesn't need to tell the wife to, women, lay down your life for your husband. You know, women, love your husbands, because we will love our husband. We will sacrifice, we will lay down our lives. But as Frankie said, when the design and the power differential is ungodly and has been tainted by sin, there's frustration. We do it, but we don't feel appreciated. You know, so we do it and we are frustrated. And that's where it builds up all the angst. It may come out in ways that it shouldn't come out, you know, undermining the husband or saying, you know, snide remarks at the wrong time, just to try and get the point across. So if the husband can love the wife, right? And regardless of whether she's lovable, you chose her, okay? She's your wife. So you have to remember the lovable part of her and bring that out. When you are tender towards her, she will also melt and she will start to show that tenderness back towards you. Yeah, and the same way you don't want her to point out your faults, don't have in your mind all her faults also. Okay, so both husbands and wife really lift each other up. Do simple things like and I like what Parksen talked about for young fathers as well, right? And coming in and checking in with your wife. So ask simple questions that we do even today. Like, hey, how are you? How was your day? And come home, check with one another, hopefully first and soon enough, not straight to the baby, straight to the children, and forgot about the wife or the husband. And then we often talk about all the practical operational things. Oh, tomorrow got tuition, tomorrow got what? Can you please send the who, tomorrow who needs to pick up, got medical, because wives can go into that mode, right? Try to put that aside, just on the how are you, how was your day, and check in with each other's feelings as often as you can, and cheer each other on. We make it a point to say thank you to one another when we're doing simple things in the home. We've always had manage our own household, so we never had a helper at home. So if let's say he's washing the dishes, I can say, yeah lah, I wash every other time, right? Then I just like very happy. No, but I don't. I will go and say, hey, thanks, dear, And even if I'm washing or I'm clearing, he will come and thank me. I mean, like we do this supposed to be our automatic thing and supposed to be our what you call that? No one else would do, right? But we still appreciate it because we know it's hard work. We know the person put some effort into it. Yeah. So learn to praise one another, in the ways that matters to the other person.
Thanks so much, Tina, for the great reminder for us, right, to really take into consideration each other's feelings and not just be so task-oriented, but also look at the deeper needs of our spouse. If I could add on to that, to now ask about the question that's raised in Slido. Now, in terms of our relationship with our children, the question is, what is the father that God desires me to be? Right? So what are some attributes of a godly father? Would perhaps Frankie like to speak into that, since you just now you mentioned about authentic fathering, right, and some attributes. Would you like to speak into that, Frankie?
That's what Tina shared earlier. Loving the wife is key, and it's never easy. It will take us forever to learn, just as Christ loved the church. And as a father, what I learned is that as men, as fathers, we need to initiate, just like God the Father. He creates and he initiates. Yeah, he creates and initiates. So you're always looking for opportunities to create and initiate. You are the source, so you are the life giver. So imagine if you're the source, all life comes from the source. So if the source is not initiating, down the line, the rest of the loved ones under your care, under your charge, will not receive it. Yeah, so it's continually asking ourselves, downloading from God, what I should do and what I should not do. It's easy for me to turn to hobbies and vices and especially when the kids grow older, you find that you have a bit more time. So that's when the heart of reaching out is so important. Always, it's for me, I thank God that He's given me a heart to reach out to other men, even younger men. In recent years, I've been more convicted to reach out to younger men. For many years, I've been reaching out to fathers, but we start to see that many fathers are struggling because when they become husbands and fathers, they realize that they have to backtrack to where they were to understand their manhood. So God has led many younger men to my midst to see that they are crying out to understand what manhood means to them before they could even seek out the right relationship to settle down and become a husband and subsequently become a father. Yeah, so it's really constantly seeking out, looking for resources, looking for mentors and mentees. I was just about to say that we are all, there are many biological fathers here, but at the same time, we also have many spiritual children in our midst. Younger people that require us to point them back to their parents. And that's when we can really do our part, for our own biological families as well as the larger spiritual family. Yeah, so it's really rejecting passivity, accepting our responsibility, leading courageously, and to invest eternally. Yeah, they're all very, very tall order to achieve. So it constantly reminds me to to seek up, yeah, and to understand what it means day to day.
Thank you, Frankie. Yeah, I know there's one reminder I can never get enough of, and that's from Matthew 20. Whoever desires to be great among you must first be your servant, and whoever desires to be first among you must first be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. I know I can never get enough reminder of this beautiful commandment that in the kingdom of God, greatness is measured upside down by service and not how much and how many serve us, right? I was wondering whether I can ask one question before we ask the panelists for an encouragement. This is around teenagers that we see around us who are fatherless, who haven't been fathered, and we see warning signs. And while they're not people to be fixed, right, we see them like perhaps how Bruce was 40 years ago, right, going down towards this path. I wonder whether you guys have got ideas how, as caring adults, we can forge some relationships with people that we meet and people that we see, neighbors even, and how we can perhaps intervene effectively.
I guess in the line of work that I do in my ministry, I do come across many teenagers who are like that, who are fatherless. And what I realized was what they really need is a friend or a father figure, for lack of a better term, a surrogate father, someone whom they can seek advice. Because I know they have many questions about life that's unanswered in them. And many times they cannot ask their mothers for the answer, like, for one reason or another. Sometimes being men, like sort of like it's easier to talk to a man rather than a woman kind of thing. So I find that if you do come across someone, your neighbor or someone in your neighborhood, or even someone who's staying very far away, who's lacking of a father figure in his or her life, it's good to make a start, be a friend, be that person's friend. Sometimes spending time with them, I guess, is all that's needed, to allow for that bonding, and let yourself be an example of how life should be led. Instead of them looking to their friends who more often than not would lead them down the wrong path, they have you as an example. That, in my experience, would be a great help.
That's great. Parcsen or Frankie or Tina, do you guys have ideas how we can begin to bond with these teenagers?
I think there are many community services, that have youth mentoring kind of systems, and even universities also. They're also looking for vocational kind of mentors, career mentors. So there are many opportunities in the community, and I would really encourage Christians to go out and find these type of secular opportunities, because that's where the world is, right? That's where the needs are. And I tell you, many of them won't turn you away because there's so many opportunities there. So don't just look in your church, of course your church would have needs as well, but look beyond. It could even be your RC downstairs, some youth committee or whatever. Just go and say, hey, would you need an old man around, or not, maybe not all of your old men middle-aged men. And I think having that mindset of I just want to reach out, I just want to be there, and not to have that that mentality that my time is over already lah. I've already, my child's already grown up. I'm a retiree. So there's the attitude of very laid back kind of thing. But if you're just present, being there as a father figure, you'll be quite amazed how many, like Bruce said, some things they just draw towards a man. They just need to say to a father figure kind of thing. It may not always be their deepest secrets at the moment. It may be silly things they want to talk about or joke about, but that's where the relationship is built. Yeah, and I'm sure if you reach out even to Salt and Light, I know of some university people that are looking for mentors as well, and looking for homes to open up to overseas students, things like that. Yeah, so there are many opportunities even being spearheaded by our young people. Look for them, Google them, or ask around to other people who are more connected, and definitely there'll be opportunities. Yeah.
And may I just add, to those of you out there who are thinking of taking on this role, please be serious about it. All right, please be serious about it, because I've seen a few who, halfway through they give up. To me, these are people's lives you're talking about.
Yeah.
When you start having a bond, or when a teenager starts having a bond with you, and then that bond breaks, or you suddenly just disappear due to whatever reason. Oh, I'm sorry, I've no time for you. I got something to do. That will break the person's heart. All right. So if you are thinking of embarking on this role, please do take your role seriously. And if you think you cannot commit, then don't.
That's good warning. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah. Parksen, anything from you?
Well, I was also going to say what Tina has already said, and that is, there are many opportunities out there. There are grassroots organizations, there are Christian organizations that you can go in and lend your hand, to just spend time, to invest your time into the younger people. But a caution would be go in with a teachable heart as well, and not going in, thinking that you know it all and you're here to provide all the answers, because honestly, we don't have all the answers. I think we're still figuring out some things for ourselves, and who are we to tell, and don't forget there is a generational gap, right? And today, because things change very quickly, so the generation gap could be wider than you anticipate. So go in with humility, go in with a teachable heart, all right, and show yourself. Model what it's like to be teachable to the younger people. Otherwise, because the young people, many tend to be arrogant, all right? Oh, we know everything because we have the internet, and things like that. So show them what being humble, show them what being teachable is. I think that is a very valuable, priceless characteristics to have.
Thank you. Yeah. So what we're going to do is because this is supposed to end at 10 o'clock. So I will invite Bruce, Frankie, Tina, and Parksen just to filter and give us your key message that you want our audience tonight to take away, for myself to take away. And then what we'll do is there are still some questions on Slido, great questions that we would hope to go through. And we would extend the show by depending 15-20 minutes. Carol will make some announcements right after the final encouragement. So if I could just invite maybe Bruce to start your final message.
Well, I grew up without a father figure around. So I'd like to encourage all you fathers out there to take your role seriously. Take your role seriously. A child growing up without a father figure will grow up lacking in something. And my mom is Chinese, and from young, I'm always told this. When a child grows up and a child misbehaves, for the Chinese family or the Chinese community, the child isn't blamed for it. In Hokkien, we would say, what's called bo ka si. That means your parents didn't raise you well, right? So, so fathers out there, do spend more time with your child or your children and take your role seriously.
Thank you. That's great. Simple, but so practical and powerful. Thank you. Frankie and Tina?
Yeah, for me, I would encourage fathers to perhaps put equal emphasis on the work front and the home front. It's almost like looking at two mirrors every day, right? Mirror, mirror on the wall, how am I doing on the work front? And then you come back home, mirror, mirror on the wall, how am I doing on the home front? Yeah, and I think God wants us to honor Him, both in our work, in the area of expertise and gifting that He has given to us. At the same time, He wants us to honor Him in the home front. That's where faith and discipleship first takes place. and then we can go out there to reach out more to others.
I think one word I'd like to encourage all fathers here is God is a God of redemption, right? So he can redeem your fatherhood, even if you had thrown it away to other things. For example, some of questions, right, like gambling or whatever other times when you didn't connect with your children, God can redeem. Yeah, he can redeem your relationship with your wife as well. Yeah, he can redeem your sense of self-worth. Yeah, God can redeem. He can resurrect even what is dead. Yeah, so trust in God and bring God into your manhood, because he's the one who invented it and he will see you through. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Parcsen?
I guess my message to fathers would be, remember you are dads in progress. Right? I'm sure you're familiar with the movement called Dads for Life. Yes, we are dads for life, but we are always in progress. So, we have not arrived. None of us have arrived, and there's always room for growth. And fatherhood is a very, very good place where you will actually grow. See it as part of your personal growth and development program. Okay, raising your first child, and then after that having another. Each one will test you in different ways. Each one will sharpen you in different areas of your life. It will grow your empathy. It will grow your negotiation skills and your ability to collaborate and communicate and things like that. So if you allow your child or your children to challenge you and to stretch you, you will find that you will end up to be a better person than you began with. So see yourself as a dad in progress.
Thank you, Parcsen. I was wondering whether I can just close us in prayer, and then I'll pass the time to Carol for some announcements. Thank you. God, you know that for so long, the desire of my heart has been for children to look at their earthly fathers and by the grace of God, think to themselves, say to themselves, you are just like my Father in heaven. You are brave like my Father in heaven. You are sacrificial like my Father in heaven. You are kind like my Father in heaven. And you pursue me like my Father in heaven, to lay your life down for me so I may have life. And without you, I will not be the person that I am. Father, that is the deepest cry of our hearts, that our children will look at their earthly fathers and think to themselves that we, however imperfect we are, bear a resemblance to Father God in heaven. God, we cannot do this by trying harder. We cannot do this by wishing and simply just making it our ideal. But God, we need your help. Holy Spirit, we need you to inhabit every father represented here, every parent represented here, and to dwell in our homes so that your kingdom will be ushered in through sacrificial, caring, brave fathers who will lay down their lives for their families, just like our Lord, just like Father God would. So, Father, we pray that as you who are our helper, as you who are our comforter, come alongside us in this journey of fatherhood. Father, I pray that fathers in this land will arise to be the men that you have called them to be, leading by serving, leading by laying down their lives so that others may have life. We ask this, and we ask you to bless every family. We ask you to bless every father and every marriage that is represented here in this platform. We ask this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, everyone. Right. And so just give me a few minutes. I have a few more slides to share with you on what's coming up next. But in the meantime, the Zoom chat is open for you to show your appreciation. And if you could also share, what is the one learning point for tonight? What is the one thing that God has spoken to you from the great conversation that we had tonight? Please put into the chat while I toggle over to my slide. If you have any other questions we will try in the next maybe 20 minutes or so to answer as many questions as we can in Slido. But if you have any other further comments or questions or ideas on what topics we could cover, please email us at famillynight@saltandlight.sg. Okay. And then the recording for tonight will be available on Salt and Light's YouTube channel from next Friday onwards. So all our past episodes, they are all on YouTube as well, and they are of diverse topics. So go check them out. The next time we meet, and we always meet on the last Tuesday of the month, we are going to talk about money. How can we teach our children to manage money God's way? And we have got a great panel already lined up. So registration is open. Join us on 26 April at 8:30 as usual. And if you have benefited from tonight's conversation, do contribute and be part of the great work of Thirst Collective. They run Salt and Light as well as Thirst. And you can just go to your banking app and scan the QR code and join us in the ministry of strengthening families together. So thank you so much for making time tonight. The session is formally over, and those who want to stay back, we will answer as many of the questions as possible. Do leave your learning point and your appreciation, if you like, in the Zoom chat. Okay, so if I could take the first question in the bonus time that we have, it's about teaching masculinity. I think perhaps some fathers have certain expectation on how they should be teaching masculinity to their boys. Okay, and so the specific question is how to father boys who are sensitive and emotional, right? The father says that he doesn't feel that it's a bad thing, but how do we balance between, you know, what the child is, and perhaps is there a need to, you know, how much of this father man thing that I need to inculcate in with the boys? So Frankie and Tina, since you have 3 boys, would you like to take the lead in that first?
Go ahead.
You go ahead with masculinity. Maybe I'll start with the sensitive boy part. I think there's a whole range of characteristics, right? And the sensitive boys definitely have a different gift from the father. Yeah, they can actually end up having a gift of evangelism or even being a gift of a prophet. I'm talking about spiritual gifts. Yeah, because they're so sensitive to their atmosphere. They're so sensitive to other people's emotions. But when they're young, they don't know what to do with it. You know, so we have our youngest one who is very sensitive, very emotional. That's why he's very anxious. But interestingly, he was actually very confident for a period. You know, he was reaching out to others even in his own little way when he was like 9 and 10 years old. But somehow at the age of 11, you know, he just, everything just was too unbearable for him. You know, he was seeing how teachers were too fierce, and then he would be empathizing on other people's behalf, you know, things like that. So I think all those emotions were really just too much for his little soul to bear. Yeah, so I think as fathers, it's important not to belittle the emotions of your sons, especially if you are not the emotional type. You know, you are just the very hardcore, you know, task-oriented, you know, feelings are just sad, happy, angry, that's all, you know. Learn emotions from your son, you know, start to ask him questions about, you know, what's bothering him, and see that it is true how God is leading him to sense things in the world that is actually going to be his gifting and his ministry in the future as well. Yeah, so I think when you harness that, that is also masculinity, you know, because masculinity is not just about like a macho man or like being a hero or being muscular or something, but to be strong in the gifts that God has given you, and to be able to act in those gifts with the confidence that you have and that dependence on God. Yeah.
I would model for them, not so much in just the doing, not associating masculinity with, let's say, being active in sports and vice versa. Because as a dad, I'm actually very into sports most of my life. But interestingly, all my 3 boys, though they are active and young, but as they grew older, they are all focusing a lot more on their artistic gifts now. Yeah, so it's not belittling, you know, what they are doing and comparing what they do with me. So I've never pushed them to do the sports that I'm good at or I'm interested in, but to really model for them what I do as a man, as a father, as a husband. At the same time, affirming them of their gifts I told them that I used to be very artistic when I was young too. They have not seen the side of me. Yeah, since I was an adult, I started to become more active and very much involved in the physical side of the house. So they do enjoy watching me in my space, involving in sports and all that. But constantly I have to affirm them that it's okay. You don't have to follow after my footsteps. You see a lot of fathers, they bring their kids out for football matches. They sort of condition their kids to follow what they do. So I try not to do that, and I talk to them about all these things as well, and they appreciate. Yeah, they appreciate me not sort of enforcing the things that I like to do upon them, but to allow them to explore and flourish in the areas of gifting that God has given to them. Yeah, and that's been great, to watch them grow, and now they are all in their teens and late teens, and all very, very artistic.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us, Frankie and Tina, that there are many ways to be boys and not just sporty and do all the boyish stuff. Parksen, any thoughts?
I think that's a good question. I think one of the things I've found out quite recently is that infant boys actually were found to be more emotionally expressive than infant girls. All right, and you can read about it. This was research done by Dr. Edward Tronick from the Massachusetts University at Boston. And he's also well known for this experiment called the still face experiment. Just Google it on YouTube, you'll find it, still face experiment by Edward Tronick. And, so boys are very emotionally sensitive and expressive as infants. But, by the time they become maybe 9, 10 years old, or maybe even in teenage, you find that they've changed. What happened? Well, they were somehow forced into this thing called the man box. The man box is a stereotype, for males, men don't cry, boys don't cry, and things like that, right? And so they were kind of made to conform to a certain, characteristics that fits what is known as masculinity, which ends up to be toxic masculinity. So in Center for Fathering, I've actually started a new series called Raising Sons, and we are exploring different things about the toxic masculinity and how do we do it the opposite of that. So on one session, we talked about emotions, and then another, we talked about purpose and, life goals and things like that, passion and purpose. And then the most recent one, we were talking about courage. All right. So check it out. It's called Raising Sons and Center for Fathering.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. So there is this question, right, about being emotional. What if the father is the more emotional one compared to the mother? And sometimes our sons are emotional, right? And how do we affirm them?
Can I start?
Sure, please, Parksen.
I think we are all supposed to be emotional. If you're not, I used to be non-emotional because it was all plugged up, all right? Because of my childhood, my parents' divorce, as I was telling you. And it took me more than 20 years to unplug it, all right? I spent a year in counseling and, and that was part of the process, but many things else had to happen before it was able, this had to be unplugged. So I do help a lot of couples in their marriage, all right, whether it's marriage preparation or, marriage counseling. And there was one case in particular where the husband kept saying, my wife is always very emotional, but I'm the rational one. And I heard him say it a few times, but I didn't want to, correct him or anything. I just wanted to let it go. But till the fourth or fifth time, I had to correct him. And I said, are you sure you're really, the rational and logical one? I think you're emotional. You just are not aware of what you're feeling, and it has already affected your thinking. All right. So you're actually not rational or logical at all. And that led to another series of meetings I had with him, just him alone, and to help him reconnect with his emotions. So there are things that could have happened in our childhood, in our growing up time, that has somehow suppressed or repressed our emotional sensitivity and awareness, our self-awareness. Okay, and we think that we are more rational and things like that. It's not true. We are all meant to be, very emotional first and then logical. Okay, so a lot of our logic is affected by our emotions, but if we are not aware of what we're feeling, then our logic is actually illogical.
Thanks, Parksen.
You know,
Thanks.
at home,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm the emotional one. All right, compared to my wife, seriously, I am more emotional. But like what Parksen said, I know where to draw the line. You know, what is emotional decisions made because I'm emotional, or you know, by logic, right? But one thing that I teach my daughter is this. I teach my daughter, for a woman, it's okay to be tough. All right. I guess the world's view on women is, you know, you have to be more demure, which my daughter is. But in the same token, you know, I would like to impart some how should I put it now? Things that boys do, all right, and not solely girls. Yeah, I guess maybe it's because of the way that I grew up. The world that I'm in, the world that I come from, you know, it's very cruel. All right, it's very cruel. It is not your normal world. So I know how dangerous it can be out there. From a young age, I've already taught my daughter in an as adult language as possible, you know, sort of like the ways of the world. Yeah, just to let her get accustomed to it. All right, so boys or girls, it's for all you boys out there or men out there, it's okay to be emotional. All right, I'm covered with tattoos and I'm emotional, so you know, you can please go ahead and do it. Yeah, and for all you mothers out there, yeah, teach your son, let your son know it's okay to be emotional, and let your daughters know that, hey, it's okay to be a bit tomboyish also.
Thanks, Bruce. I think learning to manage emotions and processing it healthily is so important, whether we are boys or girls. One final question for tonight for all the panelists is, what should a father do? What would you do as a father if you find out that your child is being bullied? You know, some fathers might say you need to bash them back, or you know, be tough, or what would you do? What would your advice be? Maybe starting with Bruce first, and then Parksen, and then Frankie and Tina.
Thank you. I witnessed this when my daughter was 3 years old, which I was very proud of. I think she was 3 years, just before I went into prison. I brought her to the playground. She was using the slides, and there was this kid who was older than her. You know, he was like pushing. It was a he was like pushing his way through, trying to push her away. You know, but I was trying to hit her actually. And I saw my daughter standing her ground. She kept saying no, 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 no. All right, which was something that I taught her. Besides the head budding, when you know you're cornered, that is. She kept saying no, 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 and then when she was cornered, what she did was she held on to the boy's hand. She held on to the boy's hand and just said a very loud no, and pushed the hands away, and she walked away. You know, I chose not to interfere or intervene because my belief is children or a child learns best he or she learns best when he or she is in this situation, and you let that child handle the situation by his or herself. That is the best way for a child to learn. If you were to intervene, you were to shelter your child, each time your child faces a problem, you go up and try and settle it for your child. How do you expect your child to learn? Yeah, so my parenting method has always been, you have a problem, I always tell my daughter this. For example, her school bags, unless it's very heavy, I do have a heart. If you don't know by now, I do have a heart. I'll tell my daughter, whose bag is it? Mine. So whose responsibility? Mine. Then take it yourself. Yeah. Whose cup is this? Mine. Then go and wash it yourself. Yeah. This is the way I do things. Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce. Parksen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we tend to want to go into problem-solving mode, right? Okay, what do we do with this boy? Do we tell the teacher, you know, and things like that? I think that will eventually have to happen, but I think again, let's focus on the emotions. First, find out how the child feels about it. You know, what's the level of fear, or you know, things like that. empathize with the child, all right? I think that is very important, because that will give the child a sense that, well, somebody is on my side at least, right? The most important people in my life are on my side, and they are concerned, and they want to know how I'm feeling about it. And then you can also use that to teach empathy, right? Because, majority of people who bully have very fragile self-esteem. Okay, they seem to be very brave and very bold and things like that, but actually the truth of the matter is they have very fragile self-esteem, and that's why they have to resort to bullying to kind of raise themselves up, right? And put themselves on a higher level, okay, and through fear and through intimidation. So that's something I think children can learn about that, all right? That the one being bullied actually is the stronger one, and they have no reasons to, in that sense, live in fear or be terrified, all right, out of their socks. So empathy both ways, all right? The parents can show empathy to the child, and then after that help the child to understand what's really happening from the perspective of the bully themselves. And then after that, you can go into the problem solving mode about, okay, how do we handle this? Do we tell the teacher? Do we, talk to the parents and, or whatever, or, also maybe giving the child certain tips about how to either avoid or how to face up to the bully the next time this happens, right? So the problem solving part is the easier part. I think the empathy part is something that we all very often skip over.
Thanks, Parcsen, for reminding us. Yeah, empathy, even in a situation of bullying. Frankie and Tina?
I agree with what Bruce and Parcsen has shared. Maybe what I would add is it also depends on at what age my son is being bullied. I guess if they are much younger, then it leaves more room, for us to step in more, especially if they're so young and they can't understand the situation and they can't stand up and they can't speak out and they can't defend themselves. But I think as they get older, then we need to take more time and effort to really understand the situation and to enable and empower them, to be able to speak up and defend their position, because they may encounter it more than once. And it's important for them, like what Bruce said, to be able to stand up for themselves. So the enablement, the empowerment is important.
Thank you, guys. Strength from the inside out. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Tina, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think many times we jump on the protective mode, right?
Right.
As parents, and even especially as mothers too. But I think the important thing is also to take the opportunity to pray for your children, to pray with them with regarding the situation, and to also trust that God is so much bigger than us, where we're not there to be with them in that every day when they're facing that bullying, right? We can give them all the greatest advice, but then when they're face to face with that situation, when they're feeling hurt, when they're feeling rejected, we can't be there, but God is there, and to allow this opportunity to be the time to highlight the importance of their own relationship with Father God, so that they would know that their spiritual faith is bigger than whatever that they will face physically. And I think that's really important, because otherwise, like Parcsen said, you jump into problem solving mode and end up you can become very, we can be so protective and fierce, in the sense that we actually don't even give room for learning, in any way. And I think a note also for children who have special needs or who have some social communication deficits, you find another student, like for every day, or somebody comes and eats half of his food and he didn't even say a thing to you. So I think for parents like us who have special needs children, oftentimes you only know after the fact, years down the road. So it's really that realistic thing where you have to have trusted that God was with him, and he is, with every one of our children, to see them through. Because there's so many times when it's happened so long after, you hear of it so long after, you can't even intervene. So that's a different perspective as well. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Tina. Well, I've really enjoyed listening to Parksen, to Tina, to Frankie, to Bruce tonight. I just want to, I think, remind all of us again that the power comes by doing, right? Power comes not by wishing and not by desiring, but by doing something, by putting some of our learning points tonight to action. So it could be asking our spouses, how can I better support you? It could be loving our wives. It could be respecting and honoring and our husbands. It could be getting on our knees to commit our impossible situations to the Lord. Whatever it is, it could be different things with different people, but power comes by doing. So what are you going to do after tonight to usher a greater slice of heaven into our homes? And I just want to leave that as a parting thought for everybody. And we're just going to close this call after this. So I'm really thankful. Yes, please drop your action points so that we can keep one another accountable. And as we write, like there is just something that registers in our head as well that would bring us closer to putting our resolutions to action. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Frankie and Tina, and thank you, Parksen. I've so enjoyed listening to you tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So now you can unmute. I have turned it. You can now unmute and say thank you to the panelists if you want before you go. Pen your learning point into the chat, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all.